I suppose this is kind of the ideal show from my point of view, because even if I weren't doing a show, it would make sense to me and give pleasure to me to sit down with my old friend David Edelstein and just talk about the year in movies. And we do this sometimes, and we try to make it as much as possible like you're just sitting, one table over from us at a restaurant or something and hearing us talk about movies, which means that he'll probably be bugging me and complaining about me and all the things that he's been doing all these decades. But it's been an interesting year in movies. He's got a lot of interesting things to say about some of those movies. So, yeah, join us for a conversation right after this. Okay, so we should be doing the nose, or we sometimes would be doing the nose right at this particular moment. Assuming that this gets on the air on Friday, I no longer have any control over the schedule of this show or what we're doing. But what we're doing right now that you're going to hear at some point is recording a show involving something that I really love doing, which is just talking with my friend David Edelstein, America's greatest living film critic, about movies, and particularly about what kind of year it's been. What has 2019 been at the movies? Critics are coming out with their 10 best list and things like that. Critics, including David, are doing that. But to me, it's not just that. It's the things that were maybe a little bit more disappointing, things you might have looked forward to that weren't as great, things that kind of fell in the middle, things that were really unexpectedly horrible or expectedly horrible, in a new category that I'm inventing this year, which is, at least for me, a movie I didn't see, and the act of not seeing the movie is a very specific kind of event in my own life. So with no further ado, it's time to talk to David Edelstein, who's joining us from studios in New York, the wonderful Argo Studios in New York, not connected to the movie of the same name. David, welcome back.
Hi, thanks so much for having me. I'm really happy to be here.
So were you overall in 2019 a happy moviegoer? Were there enough things to kind of hang your hat on to get excited about so that you felt pretty good about the year?
It was the best of times. It was the worst of times. I had an embarrassment of riches in terms of, as I do most years. But I think what we saw with exhibition is very, very frustrating. Martin Scorsese, I know you talked about this a great deal on your show, dared to come out and say that movies were somewhat poorer because one giant squid corporate entity had basically taken over not only all the multiplex screens, but increasingly more and more of the means of distribution and exhibition. And we're making, I won't call them cookie cutter films, but I'll say they're the same genre. They all have the same ending. They all build to the same things. They have the same beats. And of course, the nerds, the Marvel nerds, the DC nerds got on him. And he was unquestionably right. I'm not going to sit here and dump on Marvel films because not too many miles from where you're sitting in the studio, I would sit as a boy and watch every terrible Flash Gordon or Buck Rogers serial I could. When I found out that they had made a Fantastic Four movie and they buried it, it was some sort of tax dodge or something having to do with the rights to the comic, I pursued it. I don't know that anybody's ever seen it, but the idea that, someone would make a movie with the Fantastic Four, it was so cool. I just never dreamed a day would come along when those movies would crowd everything out of the marketplace and cost $200 million to make, with a promised return of $1 billion, and nobody would want to make $30 million anymore that could make $60 million.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yes, and obviously there's sort of a pincer movement here. On the one hand, you've got Marvel and other comic book franchises dominating the marketplace. On the other hand, you have Netflix, which is exhibiting some of the more artistically interesting movies on a limited number of screens and for a shorter amount of time. But since you brought up Marty Scorsese and his critique, then he has to put up or shut up. So he released The Irishman. Let's hear a little clip. You're going to hear Al Pacino as Jimmy Hoffa, Robert De Niro as Frank Sheeran. I believe this is like the two old guys sitting around in their pajamas in the hotel room talking.
I want you to run for president of Local 326. You're like family to me, Frank. You, Irene, the girls, the lovely Peggy. But that's not why I'm doing this. I'm not giving you anything you didn't earn. You didn't deserve. What do you think?
I don't know what to say, Jimmy.
Well, just say you do it. That's all you gotta say. Because I can guarantee you're gonna win. When you run for president of 326, you're gonna win. I guarantee you.
Yeah, okay, yeah, I'll do it. Yeah.
You mean it, huh?
Yeah, I'm honored.
I love you. I just love you, Come here. I love you, man. I can't tell you. Oh, gee. Oh, this is so good. I feel like I can breathe again.
Okay, so David Edelstein, you have over cheeseburgers more than one time, I think, discussed the work of Martin Scorsese with my son, who's kind of a Scorsese fan, but he loves Mean Streets. He loves Casino. He loves, he loves Goodfellas. He couldn't get through this movie, and he tried to watch it at home on Netflix, and I chastised him for not playing it all the way through its full 3.5 hours. But I don't know. Did Scorsese deliver on his promise of great cinema?
I dispute your premise here.
Okay.
I don't think Scorsese has any obligation to put up or shut up. The director of Taxi Driver and Mean Streets and Raging Bull and a lot of other movies has no obligation to give us any more masterpieces, and yet he has.
Yep.
Now, admittedly, this is an old man's movie. It is really probably the worst thing that you're going to convince the Marvel fanboys with of all the movies. I mean, if he had given us another Raging Bull, that would have been different. But he is an old man. This is an old man's movie. It is a movie about, what is it about? It's about guilt. It's about paralysis in a certain way, moral paralysis, if not physical, although it becomes about physical paralysis too. I mean, it opens in a Catholic convalescent home where the hero is stuck in a wheelchair, and there are just people who will see that and say, this movie is not going anywhere I want to go with it. It's paced very, very slowly. It's very garrulous. I think it's enormously affecting. But again, we're looking at this new model now of exhibition. And I would not have wanted to see it for the first time on television, on my TV screen, however big. I would have wanted to sit in a movie theater where my attention was trained on the screen, and I was, yes, I'll use the word forced to watch it, because there are great works of art that you don't necessarily want to have competing with your bed, with your sofa, with your refrigerator, with your bathroom, with your telephone. And that's just the nature of theatrical exhibition versus at home. I now, when I'm watching something for work, put the remote control across the room, so that I'm not going to drift off. I'm not going to be tempted at any point to pause and go back, but I have to pay attention to it as if there were a real live projectionist or whatever they are nowadays, because they're not projecting.
They're robots.
Yes. As if there were somebody there showing the movie and I was not going to have a chance to go back. There's just a different kind of investment. And I'm not saying that the gap is closing between the two media, but it's not closing that much. I still don't want to see that movie first on the home screen.
Right. I utterly agree. And I did see it in the movie theater. And I also feel as though I went back and I watched Goodfellas again. And, it's almost like Scorsese morally had to make this movie, because
absolutely,
at the end of Goodfellas, the last thing we see is Ray Liotta. He's been relocated. Henry Hill's been relocated to a new place, and he just says how much he misses his old life.
The rush.
Yeah, he misses the rush. He has to wait in line like everybody else now, and that's pretty pretty much the last sentiment that's uttered in Goodfellas is this terrific thing was taken away from him. So you almost have to make this movie to say, no, ultimately, here's where this ends. You have nothing. Right. You have nothing.
That's right. And in a way, it's Scorsese. I mean, I'm not going to say it's an auto-critique because Scorsese's probably very proud of Goodfellas. But it seems to me, if Scorsese wanted to stage the killings in this movie in a much more sensational, flashy, showstopper way, he could very well have done so. He has certainly done that in the past. Instead, we don't get the whip pans. We don't get the Rolling Stones songs. We get what is in fact very blunt, very ugly, arrhythmic, awkward, and full of sort of disgust and regret afterwards. It's a movie it's a gangster movie for people who are, in a way, have moved beyond gangster movies and are thinking about much larger, maybe more metaphysical or certainly more religious questions. And that's just not, sorry, Marvelites, that's just not something I think you're prepared to grapple with right now. And say what you will. Maybe I'm a snob, but I like it. I like it right now.
Ant-Man often wonders what it's like. What does it mean to be a person? What does it mean to be a person of limited lifespan?
Now wait a minute. Now you see, I like Ant-Man. Paul Rudd can be in anything. I adore the guy, and he is every bit as sweet off screen, I can say, having met him once, as he is on screen. I just feel that. Like I said before, it's a matter of degree. You don't have the reason that Netflix has been able to swoop in and Amazon has been able to swoop in is that they've made so many billions, if not trillions, off this new medium, this new way of accessing entertainment, that now they are able to fund all sorts of artists who the Hollywood studios are not funding anymore. And on one level, I want to say, that's fantastic. And on another level, I want to say, hey, you can all... I'm talking about The Irishman right now. We're going to talk about Marriage Story. You guys can actually go and watch these things right now. You don't have to wait months and months if they come at all. Now, you're lucky in Hartford that there are a number of really first-rate, quote-unquote, art house theaters there. But a lot of places in the country there aren't. And it's very difficult to access some of these films the way you can. On the other hand, what are they doing with these films? Mm-hmm. What are they doing with them? It's just, they just become part of the mix in a way that movies never have been before. Some could say that's good because everybody was talking about The Irishman before it hit, and then when it hit, everybody else who was seeing it for the first time wanted to rush in and give their opinions. Mm-hmm. That's happening now with Marriage Story. That happens with many movies that are going this route. And maybe down the road, that will prove to be a very rewarding thing.
All right,
I don't know yet.
Since you mentioned Marriage Story, let's talk about that. That didn't make your top 10 list.
It wouldn't have made my top 50 list, my top 100 list.
I feel like Noah is not one of your favorite directors anyway.
Well, I don't know Noah,
yeah.
So I don't have anything against him personally, except the personality that I discern through his movies, which is. It's weird for me to call somebody else a snob when I'm here making fun of Marvel fans and dismissing all these things. But I'm not a film director, obviously. I find his sour self-pity in effect even in this film too.
So we should first of all just set this stage here. This is a story which chronicles a divorce. The married couple is played by Adam Driver, who's like sort of in everything basically now, and Scarlett Johansson. There are some other kind of terrific, in my opinion, supporting performances, especially by Alan Alda, who's not
Absolutely.
on long enough, but he's just unbelievably
Absolutely.
cool as maybe the one lawyer. Ray Liotta, speaking of Goodfellas, is the shark. Yeah, he's
amazing performance.
And Laura Dern
all
is the other
supporting
shark.
performance. Yeah.
So basically what you see is it kind of takes you from Halloween to Halloween, about a year's time. You see this couple who have already decided to divorce. The very first thing you hear are a marriage counselor or a mediator, I guess, has asked them to list the good qualities of the other person. That's the first thing that you see. And then you go through this process of, like a pretty familiar looking divorce process. So it wouldn't have made your top 50.
That's a brilliant opening. The opening is in many ways, I think, the note of genius in the film, because it starts out with them celebrating each other, because this sort of touchy-feely mediator, not a divorce lawyer, not somebody who is, who wants to work this out in a very grown-up way, is having them say what they love about each other as a parent and as a spouse. And it really takes you back. And there's a generosity of spirit there that I don't see in operation in the rest of the movie, because the rest of the movie is about essentially how all these terrible, shallow people and the legal system itself grinds these two noble individuals, flawed, but essentially noble individuals, down. So those characters have some stature. They have some, they have great depth and humanity. All those other characters, with the possible exception of Alan Alda, are really caricatures. Now, they're brilliant little satires of the people who may be involved in this kind of divorce case. But it does seem to me there's a kind of disconnect there and a kind of snobbery at work through everybody in the film that, isn't Adam Driver or Scarlett Johansson.
The question that I had at the end that I think maybe does get kind of close to that snobbery question. So the director is Noah Baumbach. I don't know if I ever said that. But so one of the things that you see repeatedly is that Halloween is kind of a framing device in this movie. And you repeatedly see these scenes of these parents. And it's, these are very show-busy people. He's an avant-garde director who's starting to enjoy some mainstream success.
A MacArthur genius, Greg.
And a MacArthur
genius.
He's
a certified genius.
Right.
That's right. Noah Baumbach makes his alter ego a certified genius.
And she's an actor who's now starting to direct, but in Hollywood, in L.A., and so the whole thing is very kind of bi-coastal. And I kind of did have the Nancy Meyer problem that I have. With Nancy Meyer's rom-coms are always about these people who have these fabulous houses and fabulous incomes and fabulous accessories. And I just think, well, don't average middle-class people fall in love. And there was a little bit of that here, that they were in some ways living a life that mirrors the life of the people who made the movie.
I think in some ways it mirrors it, in some ways it doesn't. I think it's a very, in some ways, cutting, affectionate, but cutting portrait of Jennifer Jason Leigh. All the biographical details fit, but Baumbach has let himself off the hook. His alter ego is, in fact, more sinned against than sinning. He had an affair, one-night stand with a stage manager after his wife would not sleep with him for a year. Basically, he doesn't really want this divorce in the same way. He's forced to leave his comfortable New York and his beloved theater troupe and be in this sterile condo, alone, no friends, and suffer the indignity of all these lawyers. It really is a poor little me portrait. He's telling a largely true story while omitting some of the key details, autobiographical details. Now, I know it shouldn't have to be true to life in order to be a good movie. I just felt there was something missing, something very emotionally dodgy about the film that happened to fit with the absence of those certain biographical details. And rather than being smarmy and tease you, Noah Baumbach did fall in love with Greta Gerwig, and he says that it didn't happen on the set of Greenberg, which his wife, Jennifer Jason Leigh, was also in. But, you can believe that or not, but it certainly started up pretty immediately, and they've been, apart from making their own movies, pretty inseparable ever since. And the absence of that character, the absence of another character, like that in his life, I think, is intended to make you feel much sorrier for the guy than you actually should be feeling.
All right. So just before we go to our first break, maybe we should just pause and say this was the year of certain things. I think one of the things it was the year of, for good or ill, was the year of Adam Driver. I mean, he's kind of everywhere you look. He's become a big force in the Star Wars franchises, but he was also in The Dead Don't Die. He's in another either Netflix or Amazon film called The Report, which I haven't seen.
I think he's better in The Report than he is in Marriage Story, although I think he's wonderful in Marriage Story.
Yeah, I mean,
I saw him on stage. I saw him on stage here on Broadway in a revival of Burn This.
Yeah.
Not a particularly good play. He actually had not a very good performance from Kerry Russell, who, I don't know if you were as addicted to The Americans, but I think she's just one of the great actresses out there.
I know. I was addicted to The Americans, and I also have a separate and less wholesome addiction to Kerry Russell. But
well, she was. I mean, it was a very poised and good performance. It didn't make sense in the context of the play. Adam Driver, first of all, he's a huge guy. He really has a lot of stature as an actor. He's got good. That's going to sound terrible. I was going to say good equipment, but equipment. Actors talk about their instrument.
Right.
He has his voice carries, his body, although it's big and it's kind of lumbering, is very expressive, and he has presence. And he really hit that out of the park and gave a very different kind of performance than John Malkovich gave in the original production. So I think he's the real thing. He's one of the weirdest looking. He's like a Modigliani or a Picasso painting. He's one of the weirdest looking heartthrobs you're ever going to see. And hey, more power to him for that, because he just seems very, very centered on stage and on film. You just want to look at him and see what he's thinking.
All right, so we're going to take a little break here. We're talking to David Edelstein, America's greatest living film critic. I read his work in New York Magazine. We'll take a break, and we'll come back.
Someone to hold you too close. Someone to hurt you too deep. Someone to sit in your chair, to ruin your sleep. That's true, but there's more than that. Is that all you think there is to it? You have so many reasons for not being with someone, Robert, but you haven't one good reason for being alone. Come on, run to something. Robbie, run to something.
All right, we're back. We're talking about the year in movies with America's greatest living film critic, David Edelstein. So, maybe it's time to turn our attention to, and I think one of the oddities of the way movies are released these days is, a lot of movies get seen in smaller doses and often by critics. And I'm looking at everybody's lists right now, and there are all these movies that not only haven't I seen, but I really hadn't even heard of. And so there are a few on your list that I think might be worth mentioning. Very near the top of your list is the movie Diane, which your support of it is my first acquaintance with it. So tell us, this is a Mary Kay Place film, right?
Well, it's the first fictional film by Kent Jones, who's known as a very gifted, idiosyncratic film critic, and also has been running for the last 7 or 8 years the New York Film Festival. Very, very well known in the film community. He began branching off into making documentaries under the auspices of Martin Scorsese. He made a documentary about Val Lewton, the great sort of B movie producer of Cat People and Leopard Man and The Body Snatchers, and he made a film based on the Hitchcock Truffaut dialogue. So he's pretty well known here in these parts. But I was unprepared for this film about a woman, middle-aged, maybe a little bit older than middle-aged woman, who has a son who is addicted to drugs, and whose life consists basically of driving around her small community. It's supposed to be set in Massachusetts, in maybe southern Massachusetts, sort of near the Cape, but it was shot in upstate New York and looked like that to me. Going around bringing food to people, working in soup kitchens, as people all around her slowly die. And it sounds horribly depressing, and a lot of people think it is very depressing. I thought it was absolutely beautiful and exhilarating as she tried to take stock of her life and also to expiate some sins that she committed in her younger days. It made me cry. I've seen it 3 times. it's a beautiful, unsparing film, and she has an opportunity to do things she's never done on screen before. There's a very fun supporting cast: Estelle Parsons, Andrea Martin, people you would recognize. It's such a full and rich movie. Now, where can you see it? I don't know. I probably should have. Looked that up. It probably didn't come to theaters in Hartford.
I don't think it has played on the screen here yet.
It barely played. It barely played in New York, but it ought to be accessible somewhere. Again, it's Diane. That's the character's name. I really want you to watch it. Don't commit suicide after you see it. It's actually think about it a while. I think it's ultimately an uplifting movie if you kind of go in expecting the worst.
All right. So another movie that I promised you last night that I would watch last night, and then I didn't, which, that's me, I guess. But which I believe did play here on one of those art screens that you talked about before at Real Artways, is Honeyland. This is a documentary, I believe, and it takes place. Well, why don't you tell us about Honeyland?
I'm fitting in right here into all the cliches of the film critic cliches, dumping on Marvel, and now I'm going to talk up a non-narrative Macedonian documentary set in the wilds of Macedonia with an aging Turkish beekeeper. It really sounds like a cliche. It sounds like this is a parody of an art film. It's not. It's an absolutely transporting. I'm sorry if you have to watch it on a small screen now because it has had its theatrical life. It's won a number of critics awards and has a fair chance. I think it certainly will be nominated for an Oscar. Whether it will win, it may not be timely enough. But it's about a woman who all her life has lived in this. I don't know if it's a yurt, but actually it's a stone. It's some sort of stone underground edifice. It's in the side of a cave, and she tends bees. And she really does become kind of at one with the bees and the landscape. And she really understands the life cycles of these bees and produces apparently fabulous honey that's a little more expensive, which she takes to market every month. And it's about the plot, such as it is. There are some kind of Turkish, I wouldn't call them gypsies, but they're kind of roving bee herders who kind of move in and mess up the landscape. And all her bees end up dying. And it kind of works at the same time as a metaphor of what's happening to the natural world and to the rhythms of the natural world. And we know that bees are imperiled. The movie's not narrated, so we don't see that. Anybody talk about that, but it's implicit. And these filmmakers, two women filmmakers, spent years following her around to get these, I think, very poetic, evocative 90 minutes. And I think if you sit and you watch it and you put the remote across the room and you tune into this, I think this movie will just fill you with joy. And pain and sadness. And this woman will acquire, I use the word stature a lot because that's what you want in a character, right? I mean, in a protagonist. I think I could not recommend this film more highly. Honeyland, one word.
All right. So if it makes you feel any better, your friend and colleague, A.O. Scott, I think he picked it as the best movie of the year, too. So it's not like you're, out on on a limb there.
That makes me doubt my judgment there.
So
A.O. is a fine fellow, but he embodies the sort of woke critic of our time. But however, I should say in his defense, he was woke before it was called woke,
right?
And I think it comes right from the heart. And he's done a lot in his position, in his pulpit, from his bully pulpit, to drive certain kinds of movies, especially by women and African-American directors. He's just a little, he's the sort of guy who, if he goes to see a Romanian movie set in the Carpathians and there are no black characters, he'll complain about it. And Oh, I don't know.
Yeah, but he was, as you say, he was woke before woke was cool.
He was woke before woke. It
All right.
was, and a fine fellow. But I do question you saying that. I didn't know that. I do then question my choice.
No, don't question your choice. So let's actually go from the somewhat obscure movies that we were just talking about to your choice. And I know these lists are artificial, and I know that you don't like making them very much.
I hate making them because they're all. I look back on them. I go back 10 years, 20 years, and I think they're all wrong. And they're not wrong by what I said about the films. They're wrong about the rankings. Oh, this should have been 1 instead of 3. This should have been 5 instead of 7. And it's like, who cares? What's important is what you say about a film, how you respond to it, what it conjures up in you. And anybody can rank, and I don't mean that in an elitist sense. I mean, you can just whip off, your 10 favorite foods right now, and we could all go around with our 10 best lists, tattooed to our forearms, and I don't know that any of us would be any better for it.
All right, so with all of that in mind, notwithstanding everything that has just been said, the envelope, please, the what occupies the number 1 position in David Edelstein's end of the year list is the following:
5 years of ascent, 10 years of treading water, now race to the bottom.
Look, I never had much of a career to speak of, so I can't say I really know how you feel.
What are you talking about? You're my stunt double. Come on now.
Rick, I'm your driver, man. I'm your gopher. I'm not complaining, man. I like driving you around. I like doing around the house sitting in the Hollywood Hills when you're gone. But I haven't been a full-time stuntman for a while now, and from where I'm standing, going to Rome to star in movies does not sound like the fate worse than death that you seem to think it is.
Come on now, you ever seen an Italian Western? Huh? They're awful. It's a farce.
Yeah, how many you seen? 1, 2?
I've seen enough, all right? Nobody likes spaghetti westerns.
The real Don Steele, Simon Garfunkel, Mrs. Robinson.
Okay, that's Quentin Tarantino's Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. A couple of news bulletins that have come to me while we've been doing this. First of all, Diane, the Mary Kay Place film that we were talking about a little while ago, is rentable on iTunes and on Amazon. So you can do that kind of thing. And also, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, the Quentin Tarantino movie, a clip of which we just heard, featuring Leo DiCaprio and Brad Pitt, is not only occupying the number 1 position for David Edelstein, but also for producer Jonathan McPants as well. So go ahead. Lift our spirits, or tell us why you love this movie.
What about the film? Well, I'm a fan of Tarantino in general, though not of his last maybe 2 or 3 movies, Django Unchained and The Hateful Eight. It seemed like he was really regressing. The best thing about Tarantino is he doesn't just make movies he wants to see. He makes movies he wants to somehow live inside, and maybe that he has lived inside in his fantasies. With very few other filmmakers, well, there are filmmakers who you feel like they're piping it in from their unconscious, like David Lynch. But with Tarantino, it's all filled with 60s bric-a-brac and old movies bric-a-brac and cultural references, but not in a sort of esoteric way, in a way that just, I'm sure, makes him smile and laugh. And I've said this before, self-pleasure, however you want to term it. There's that quality in his films. This is a fantasia of Hollywood in the 60s, in which the sort of 50s loner cowboy figure was fading. The counterculture with its hippies and Mansonites was rising. Values were kerflooey. And it's a somewhat reactionary fantasy of going back and changing history. I won't spoil it for people, but one of the seminal events of the late 60s, some people say the counterculture died the night that Sharon Tate and her house guests were butchered for no reason, not that there's any reason ever to butcher anybody, but really for no reason, by these whacked out Manson family members. He reimagines that and comes up with a very, very different and both exhilarating and kind of heartbreaking ending. I thought the movie was pure pleasure. just one long, distended, overlong, I would say, scene after another, in which you just hang out with these people who talk so beautifully and embody these people that you think you know but are always surprising you at every turn. I loved it so much, and no one else could have made this movie. There was nothing in this movie that anybody but Quentin Tarantino could have made. And what performances, down to the smallest ones, but obviously Brad Pitt and Leo DiCaprio, their rapport on screen, and Brad Pitt playing this kind of loyal dog who also has his own pride, his own sort of prickly pride. And the man looks absolutely gorgeous. I mean, what is he drinking to make? Well, actually, he drinks and smokes a lot, but somehow or other he keeps his. I met him once, and the guy reeked of tobacco and other substances, but he was very nice.
I think this is a good year for Brad Pitt in a lot of different ways. I think it's also the case that The Last Man in San Francisco wouldn't have gotten made. Last Black Man in San Francisco wouldn't have gotten made but he saw it at a festival and optioned it, and so he's done a lot of good. And I also totally agree that this is a film full of sensory pleasure, and it's so immaculately curated in that obsessive Tarantino way that
the colors. It's like at the soundtrack too. It's just
any song that's
little
playing,
bits of commercials and songs, and you're really it's a time machine to a time that never was.
Right.
Only in our imaginations, but it's intact. It's full. It has a fullness to it. That world that he conjures.
Yeah, and any song that's playing on the radio in a car was like playing on the radio at that time of day. Or, I mean, you have to kind of admire that level of mania.
Even if it wasn't, you want it to be. You believe that it was.
So I loved that, but I think that I'm going to argue for my number one film is the film that I think is an interesting companion to The Irishman, in the sense that it's a film in which the characters ask questions about what it means to be who they are, what it means to live in this particular kind of existence, and whether or not there are other choices that you can make existentially, whether you can direct your fate in a completely different, on a whole different longitude and latitude. And it's this film.
Carry me?
No.
Why do I have to be a toy?
Because you have Bonnie's name written on the bottom of your sticks.
Why do I have Bonnie's name written on the bottom of my sticks?
Because she... Look, she plays with you all the time, right?
Yes.
And who does she sleep with every night?
The big white fluffy thing?
No, not her pillow. You. All right, Forky, you have to understand how lucky you are right now. You're Bonnie's toy. You are going to help create happy memories that will last for the rest of her life.
Huh? What?
Oh, yeah. Oh, okay. Doing it for Bonnie. Doing this for Bonnie. Doing it for Bonnie. Okay. Like it or not, you are a toy. Maybe you don't like being one, but you are one nonetheless, which means you are going to be there for Andy when he
Who's Andy?
I mean, Bonnie. You have to be there for Bonnie. That is your job.
Well, what's your job?
Well, right now, it's to make sure you do yours.
Carry me?
No!
So just in the same way that Frank Sheeran is loyal to Jimmy Hoffa, Woody is loyal to Bonnie and Andy before Bonnie. Woody wonders whether he can make any other choice. Toy Story 4, David Edelstein, that's my movie of the year.
Well, good on you. Good on you.
No, aren't you going to argue against that, or you have to say
Colin,
something?
I have a confession to make.
Yeah, you didn't see Toy Story 4.
I didn't review the film this year, and this is what you were talking about. I think with The Lighthouse, I will see it. I will see it before the end of the year, but I didn't see it because I was legitimately angry that it existed. Toy Story 3, to me, was a beautiful piece of work. It ended the Toy Story saga. It rounded it perfectly. I didn't feel like, Disney or Pixar had any business going back to the well. So I was biased against it. And now you're saying these things about it does make me want to go home and unwrap my screener and take a look at it. And thank you for that.
Right.
And that's, I'm not proud of that. I'm not proud of that I would come into a film like that with a great deal of bias.
Well, we're all human. except for the toys.
Yeah, but Critic, you go in and you say this is going to be the best Sylvester Stallone movie ever.
Cliffhanger's the best. Cliffhanger's the best.
I like Cliffhanger.
I do too. I like
You
that.
know why I like Cliffhanger?
Why?
Because not just do all the bad guys die in a great deal of pain, but you see in their eyes an acknowledgement of the superiority of Sylvester Stallone.
Right. And actually, Demolition Man might be the best Sylvester Stallone movie. Demolition Man's a great movie.
We part ways there. But you know what? I'll give it another chance. You're turning me around here. You're turning me around here in a lot of movies.
I should also say that you referenced Lighthouse. This comes from our email exchanges. So I said that there should be a separate category of the movie that you deliberately didn't go see. So Bill Curry kept talking to me about how great he thought Lighthouse would be, and he wanted to go see Lighthouse. And Curry's the kind of person who likes to sit up there in Maine by himself, and look at the ocean. And I just couldn't. I really felt it was kind of an achievement to not have seen Lighthouse with Bill Curry. So that's like I'm giving myself some kind of a negative award for that. That's the only.
Okay.
All
well, right. I came to it late. Again, I didn't review it. I have some wonderful co-critics at vulture.com, which is New York Magazine's culture site. And Bilga Berry, Allison Wilmore, Angelica Jade Bastien, just to name them. And I didn't see it. I saw it late. I kind of dreaded it because it sounded to me as if it was going to be just a sort of a monotonous one-note bombardment, two guys kind of going crazy in a vacuum for 100 minutes with that would just be at once sensory overload and sensory deprivation on another level. And it's interesting, when I saw the film, that's exactly what it was. It's awful. It's awful. It's one of the most unpleasant things I've ever seen in my life. I don't understand what people are talking about. And I like this guy's other movie pretty well, The Witch.
Yeah.
But this movie, it could be a parody. I love Willem Dafoe, and Pattinson is in there working really hard. It's just why? Why do you want to see these guys go colorfully crazy? I'd rather see Dafoe play Ahab.
All right, so you're making me feel even better about my choices, which is not the usual role you have in my life, but it's good. All right, we're going to take a quick break. David Edelstein, America's greatest living film critic, is with us today, doing the year in movies. We'll have a little bit of time on the other side of this.
I'm standing all alone out by the lighthouse.
All right, well, we're back with David Edelstein. Read his reviews in New York Magazine. And so on your top 10 list this year, you had a movie that I would put on my top 10 list too. And we were just talking about Demolition Man, which brings to mind Wesley Snipes, who's in a very different place these days. So Dolomite Is My Name is the movie that we're making reference to, or we'll hear a clip there. This is not a Wesley Snipes clip. You're going to hear Keegan-Michael Key as Jerry Jones, a playwright, and Eddie Murphy as Rudy Ray Moore.
We want this thing to be raw. Tell it like it is on the streets.
Yeah, lots of pimps and whores and cussing. And kung fu and karate. Brothers love all that kung fu and karate.
Do you know karate?
No, but I'm a fast learner. I can learn how to chop me a mother. Yeah, yeah, yeah. You know what we should have? An all-girl kung fu army.
There's plenty of story opportunity, Rudy. Across this nation, inner cities are being plagued by violent crime. I feel the government hasn't stepped up.
That's it. It's Whitey's fault. The mayor's corrupt, and there's an exorcism.
God damn it. An exorcism?
Yeah, you know all that whole mother in hell.
I don't know how that fits into our urban motif.
All right. I'm laughing all over again. So this is another one of these movies that exists on a screen for a little while so it can go to a streaming service. But those of us who were lucky enough to see
it's Netflix. And by the way, everybody should also tune into Netflix and see American Factory, which is my choice for the best documentary of the year. But yeah, this is a movie. Pardon me. Eddie Murphy makes his big comeback in theaters for 2 weeks at a few theaters prior to this movie launching on Netflix. I don't know how I feel about this, because this is a movie that really deserves a raucous audience. a screaming, laughing audience. It's a broad comedy written by Scott Alexander and Larry Karaszewski, who gave us Ed Wood and kind of have created this subgenre of the ironic biopic. In other words, they're biopics of people who, in some cases are real scumbags, and in other cases are just people with absolutely no talent, but told in the sort of gee whiz Hollywood rags to riches or riches to rags to riches style of the conventional, the historical biopics that used to win Oscars for Paul Mooney and all these other people, Gandhi and Ben Kingsley, not Gandhi. Gandhi didn't actually win the Oscar, but. And it's just a wonderful, wonderful trip. And it does have some stuffing in it, because the way that Rudy Ray Moore invents himself, there is a character, this Dolomite character, who he does not create from scratch, but he asks around a lot of sort of homeless people. And there's this legend of a sort of a pimp, a libertine, a big liar, named Dolomite, and he assumes this role and becomes a folk hero all over again. That's a great story.
It is a great story, and it's the whole movie is just a joy and a delight, and kind of in a weird way, kind of a companion to Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, in the sense that it's sort of evoking a specific period really carefully, and people making movies. So there were some movies that we haven't had a chance to see here in Hartford, no matter what we do, that are making a lot of top 10 lists. Also, Richard Jewell, one of those movies, is making news today because apparently Clint Eastwood depicts a relationship between a reporter and an FBI agent, where the reporter is exchanging sex for information or tips or something in a way that the Atlanta Constitution is not happy with. But so
I don't blame them. I don't blame them, and we don't know if that happened. I certainly would not trust Clint Eastwood to tell us what happens because of his own biases, his own political biases. And this is another film. It's really it's well done at times, but it's a shameful film, just like his Sully was a shameful film, because this sort of unambiguous hero, no one in the world disagreed about the heroism of Sully for landing, a plane in the middle of the Hudson River, least of all the NTSB, the National Transit Safety Board. And yet, because of his Eastwood sort of Ayn Rand anti-regulation bias, he invents this stupid, pernicious story. The NTSB, again, not an ambiguous, they come in after fatal crashes or even non-fatal crashes, and they say what's wrong. They're not political. They perform an essential function. And in this case, they ratified everything that Sully said. He was a little annoyed that he had to go through the process, but he did, and it was completely uneventful. But the movie skews it so that he's going to lose his house, and he might be in the hole for all this money, and he has to defend his honor and his reputation, all because heroic individuals are constantly assailed by government agencies. I mean, this is just crap. And it's the stuff that Eastwood has been peddling for years and years, and he has to distort the facts in order to peddle it. Everybody says, he's our great, American living director. He's not. He's really a second-rate mind.
In the case of Richard Jewell, it is true, though, that as we were watching a trailer came on the TV set the other night, and my significant other said, "Yeah, but he did it, right?" And I said, "No, he didn't do it. Eric Rudolph did it."
Oh no!
But people forget stuff like that. Time goes by, and Richard Jewell winds up lodged in people's heads as the guy who did it.
Absolutely, and they're raging incompetence, the FBI agent who did this and who leaked this, and they deserve to be hauled up over the coals. But what Eastwood is going for is not just a few agents who leaked something in the middle of he's going after basically the government agencies that are tasked with protecting us, and right now are coming under fire, the press and the FBI, for what they're doing in the impeachment hearings. And it's no coincidence that Eastwood would make them the bugaboos, of the boogeymen of this particular film. No coincidence whatsoever.
All right. Unfortunately, we've got like 90 seconds left here, and we have so many things that we haven't talked about.
I'll just say, see Little Women when
Yeah.
it comes out. Greta Gerwig is a hell of a director. It's a really lovely film. See American Factory. Uncut Gems is a very intense film. I don't know what it adds up to.
This is the movie with Adam Sandler, who's having
with
kind of
Adam
an
Sandler.
interesting year because he was in that Noah Baumbach TV thing.
That's right.
And suddenly Adam Sandler is kind of inherently less annoying than he used to be.
It will blow you away, this movie. It's a very upsetting, nerve-jangling film, but he is, man, this is the ultimate Adam Sandler role. As I said, it's been a really good year for movies outside of the blockbuster system that is unfortunately crushing so much else.
Right. Well, Adam Sandler might be the last actor that you can't plausibly cast as a superhero. Maybe that's what's going to save us. All right. So we have to stop there. But David Edelstein, America's greatest living film critic, you can look at his top 10 list on the Vulture site of New York Magazine and follow his reviews. And thanks again. It's so great to do this.
Oh, thank you so much, Colin.
All right. And we'll be back next week. I'm thinking this is running Friday. I could be deceiving myself right now, but presumably it is, and we'll be back next week.